Thank you very much, Daryl. Appreciate that. So before I get started, and we're going to try to keep things fairly relaxed today, I do want to cover some important points for you. But how many of you ever done a triathlon before? Really? Where at, Daryl?
It was like one in high school. It was like really small.
Right? So it was like a 10-yard run, like right? A 10-yard swim and a 10-yard bike?
Eight-lap swim,
okay.
3-mile bike ride, and then a 3/4 of a mile run.
Okay. All right. Good. Anyone else? Yes. What's your name?
Jake.
Jake.
I did one in southern Utah when I was like 18.
Really?
And I just got done playing basketball for the high school team. I thought I was in really good shape, but it kicked my butt.
So Jake says it kicked his butt. So you played high school basketball, and you thought you were in really good shape until you tried to do that. You know, it's interesting. Interesting phenomena that's going on in the sport. So triathlon is one of the fastest growing participant sports in the world right now. And for good reason, because old people like me can do it fairly well. And it's interesting, the best in the world are generally between the ages of 35 and 45 years old. Now think about that in any other sport, such as basketball, baseball, or other traditional sports. What age do you think is the peak? A little louder?
20 to 30.
Yeah, so maybe 20 to 30. In fact, once you turn 30 years old, you should retire and be like most NFL or NBA players and be a life insurance agent, right? But in this sport, you can do it until you decide that you want to become dust again, if you will, until you pass on. In fact, what they found is that a 17-year-old and a 65-year-old have the same endurance capacity. That's amazing, isn't it? The difference is you young people have more what we call quick twitch muscle fiber than us people that are a little bit older. We have what's called slow twitch. Which one do you think is ideal for triathlons? Slow twitch, right, exactly. So we can actually get better at this sport as we get older. Kind of interesting. My son, Jacob, who is 17 years old, is competing in the U.S. National Championships for triathlons in Tuscaloosa, Alabama in September. And they don't have an age group for him, so he has to compete with all the 19-year-olds. But even with his best times, the older group, men and women, by the way, that are in their mid-30s, late 30s, easily beat the times of the young people. It's an amazing phenomenon. So when you get done having all the knee surgeries like I have had, and I've had 8 different surgeries, only 2 on this knee, and you have these other sports you're not able to do anymore, I encourage you to get involved with triathlons. It's an amazing deal. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life and one of the most rewarding. This last November, 2 months ago, I did Ironman Florida, and that was my first full distance Ironman. It was an amazing event, 12 hours, 58 minutes, 15 seconds, and it was a long day. You get 17 hours to finish a triathlon. That was the original time it took the Navy SEALs who invented it to actually complete it. So if you can't do it in 17 hours, even if you're 1 second late, you don't get a medal. Anyway, put it on your bucket list. All right, you want to talk business today? Yes? No? Yeah. Right, okay. So I'm Greg Peterson. I'm managing partner at Aptus Advisors. We're a small buyout firm. We love to look at small businesses. I'm going to run through a presentation that I gave in November. So the reason I brought triathlons to lead into this is I did Florida Ironman, and I finished about 8 o'clock at night. By the time you gather up all your gear, and by the way, get a massage after because you are so sore. I can't explain to you how much fatigue you have. And then finally get something to eat. I got to bed at about midnight, maybe about 12:30 a.m. I got up at 4:30 a.m. so that I could catch a flight to Bangkok, Thailand. So I was in the air within 4 hours after doing an Ironman triathlon for 25 hours total to get to Bangkok to give this presentation here that I'd like to share with you today. So let's get started on that. By the way, I got to Bangkok. I was there about 4 hours is all. Didn't get a chance to get any sleep and had to go give this presentation. And what it was for was we were trying to talk to foreign investors about investing in the United States and where we think there's some sweet spots. The reason I think it's important to share this with you today is so that you can better understand the environment that you live in today, that you go to school, is one of the best environments to get in business. And I'm going to show you a few statistics as to why that's the case. So, Aptus Advisors, as Daryl mentioned earlier, we have a lot of experience in investing, and I've been in entrepreneurship and as a private equity investor for several years. The deals that we've been in, that we've either owned or operated, we have fairly good track record. We've returned over 10 times invested capital over the last 10 years. And as Daryl mentioned, our most recent exit was about a 5X. We concentrate on growth and buyout opportunities. We love manufacturing, business distribution, business services, distribution, and logistics, which are really nuts and bolts companies, kind of our forte that we like. We do a lot of valuation and due diligence work. In fact, we have our own online deal room that actually manages the whole due diligence process when we look at deals. So we were in Bangkok presenting to these foreign investors to say, hey, you should look at investing in the United States. Now, why would we go to Asia to ask for money to be invested in the United States? Who wants to answer that? As a country as a whole, who do we owe more money to? That's right. So they are our creditors, if you will. They've got a lot of cash. And how much cash is there available in the United States for reinvestment right now? Based on the real estate crash, etc. There's not much. So anyway, that's the purpose of our trip. And so we shared with them some of these demographics. I think these are important for you to know as you consider looking at businesses in the Intermountain area. Here's some interesting statistics here. 80% of all businesses in America have less than 100 employees. So what does that tell you about our economy? Is our economy generated by large business or small business? Small business, exactly. 70% of the Inc. 5000 had less than 100 employees. So Inc. 5000 are the 5,000 fastest growing companies in the United States. 6 of the top 10 that made the top 10 list have less than 10 employees. Now, you have to have been in business at least 5 years to be on this list. Fascinating, isn't it? Question for you. How many of the Fortune 500 companies do we have in Utah? More than 10? Less than 10? More than 20? Less than 20? Who wants to take a guess? Less than 10. Okay? We don't have very many. In fact, 95% of the businesses owned here are all entrepreneurial based. Either family or entrepreneurial operator owns the company. So here's something interesting as well, though. Of those businesses that we talked about, 73% of the business owners are over the age of 50. And you're saying, 50, that is so old. Well, we have this phenomenon in the United States that's called baby boomers. You guys ever heard that? Surely you've read it in a history book. So baby boomers represents the population born between 1946 and 1964. And they own a majority of the businesses in the U.S. Now, here's another interesting statistic, though. Only 1 in 4 small business owners have some form of a succession plan. What in the world is a succession plan? Who wants to help me out? What's your name? Isaac. Isaac, help us out.
Who you're going to give the business to when you're done.
Okay, so a succession plan would be who are you going to give your business to when you're done, right? Okay?
An exit strategy.
All right, an exit strategy. Anyone else? Okay, exit strategy is good. What that means is only 25% of these businesses have a plan for them to exit, i.e. retire. Because our population in the United States is getting older, isn't it? So where do you think there might be some opportunities for the next generation? Acquisitions, right. A lot of small businesses out there that you can purchase, and many of these are well ran, but think about that. Over 70% of the economy in the United States is all driven by this. And if only 1 in 4 has a succession plan, that means 3 out of 4, what? Do not. which means they, at some point, would love to retire or pursue other interests, but they don't have an opportunity to get liquidity. All right, let's keep going here. So if you were going to invest in the United States, based on what you see here, where would be the best place to buy a business? Intermountain region, right? Interesting. We have 7-state region here, and many of you are from these states, right? Okay. In the 7 states here, we have the highest per capita number of business owners in the United States. How about that? We also have, on a per capita basis, the highest GDP. So if you have the whole oasis of the United States, where would be a great place to go find a small business to acquire? Right here. Interesting. Any questions about that? Yes, what's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff, yes.
What are the different colors representing on there?
Oh, okay. So Jeff asked, what are the different colors that are representing here? And these are just a highlight so that you have a variance is all. They don't have any particular meaning whether it's orange, red, or blue. I'm just trying to highlight different regions there. I'll have to ask my graphic designer, I don't know. Okay, let's talk about GDP growth. I mentioned earlier that the Intermountain region has the highest per capita GDP. Now, the country as a whole, what happened to GDP the last couple of years? It's declined. Why? Because unemployment did what? Went up, right? So there's a direct correlation. Now, if you look at that, so this represents the Intermountain region. We still have the least decline out of any other region in the United States. So we consistently still hold the highest per capita GDP. What about unemployment? Let's look at this. Here's the national average in blue. Here's the other 7 states. Lowest unemployment per capita in the United States. What does that tell you? Who wants to help me out?
More jobs.
What's your name?
Shane.
So Shane says more jobs. You're exactly right. But what does that tell you about the workforce as well?
Creating jobs.
Creating jobs, okay, and what else? Are the employees good at what they do? Yes. Yep, very efficient. What about wages? And I told someone earlier that the students won't like this slide because per capita income is below the national average. And that's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? So if you're a student just coming out of college, what do you want income to be? High, right? That's the whole reason you're here. But if you're going out to acquire a business, what do you want? What do you want wages to be? Lower, exactly. So there's kind of this blend, if you will. But the Intermountain region, which all ties back to GDP, low unemployment, has very stable wage and population growth. In fact, Utah, of course, is one of the highest populated states, if you will, in terms of number of children per household. But it also correlates to the number of businesses that are started, either owned by families or others. So I want to share with you a case study, and then we're going to get into a little discussion after this. This is a little company that we bought several years ago, and it represents what I believe is very typical out there in the marketplace. This company makes a product called a grouser bar, and you don't eat it. Does anyone know what a grouser bar is? All right, let me ask you another question. How many of you in here have ever ran a bulldozer? Really? What's your name?
Brandon.
Brandon, what kind did you run?
D6.
A D6. All right, so Brandon, you know what a grouser bar is then, right? I'll help you out. On a bulldozer, there's generally 2 tracks. You all know this, right? Okay. Because you played with them when you were younger. Only the tracks were rubber and it was a plastic bulldozer. But you notice on that D6 that you ran, there was those metal tracks. You know those cleats that stick up? Those are called grousers. Yeah, now you know. Look at that. You can go home and share it with all your friends. Okay? All right, it's worth the whole price of tuition to know that today, wasn't it? So, A grouser bar then is this cleat that goes on the track. So stay with me. It's Brandon, right?
Yep.
All right, stay with me. What do you do when those cleats wear down?
Hard facing.
So hard facing. So explain to everybody what that means.
You just put welds on top of them and build them down.
So what they'll do is take a welding stick and they'll just kind of build up a couple of layers of hard facing and then go back to work. But what if the pins and bushings are gone? What if you have to change the shoe out or a track pad?
Gets expensive.
Gets really expensive. So what if there was a company out there that was able to create just the grouser cleat, the grouser bar itself, and then when it wears down, all you do is take that grouser bar and set it on top of the existing cleat that's worn down and just weld it. And it restores it back to original equipment height. Would that be a good value add?
Yeah.
It's exactly what this company did. And when we got into it, the owner of the company had a couple of years previously died of a stroke. Baby boomer. And something that's unlike what's happening in Asia, most businesses that are owned in Asia are handed down from family member to family member. But in the United States, that's not happening necessarily anymore. In fact, the majority of businesses are not. And so in this particular case, the family was not interested in having a grouser bar business. They were interested in having the cash earnings that the business had generated over the years, and it was extremely profitable. So what do you think the family decided to do with it? Yep, they said, look, we're going to take the cash out of the business, which they did, which they had total right to, right? Because the business had been willed to them. Took cash out of the business, said, look, we're going to sell these assets and see what they would fetch on the open market. So we came along, we said, hey, we'd love to look at this business. And I was introduced to it by a person that helped do some advisory work for us. And we came in and paid, we were into it a little less than $2 million to buy this business. And so would that be classified as a large business or a small business? Small business, right. And it's fairly typical as to what you would see. Well, how much do you think I knew about a grouser bar when I got into that business, Brandon? I didn't know anything. In fact, I spent about 6 months researching and trying to figure out exactly what it was because personally, I've never driven a bulldozer. I had no idea how they work and what the maintenance plans are and who even uses a bulldozer. But I spent about 6 months doing what we call due diligence, meaning I went through and tried to learn as much as I could about the business, everything from operations to product quality to manufacturing to finance, customers, everything that I could learn before we pulled the trigger on the business. And we did. So we bought the business, and in the very first year, we learned that there were competitors. But a lot of businesses have competitors, right? Well, here's what we didn't know. One of our competitors in the business was looking to buy the assets of the business just like we were. And as part of their due diligence process, they were privy, if you will, to a lot of the proprietary information about the company, including customers and their buying habits. So we got into this business, and about 4 weeks later, our customers were getting letters from a competitor stating, here's what your orders were for the previous year. If you'll stick to that same plan, we'll give you a 10% discount. And we just forked out, a couple of $1 million for this business, scratching our heads thinking, oh man, what did we get ourselves into? So what do? Okay, all right. So that's an interesting thing. Who said that? And what's your name?
Steve.
All right, Steve said sue them. Okay, here's one of the things I want you to learn about business. What do you think the return on investment is for a lawsuit? Okay? It's not worth it, is it? If you were to take that same amount of money that you would spend on a lawsuit and put it into marketing and the best products that you can make, what do you think the return would be on that? Much higher. Because the only thing that's guaranteed whenever you're involved in a lawsuit is that there's only one winner. And who's that, Steve? Lawyers. Always win no matter what. They're like stockbrokers. When the market goes up, they win. When the market goes down, they still win. Enviable position, isn't it? But as a business owner, you don't want to do that. So what we said was, hey, we don't care that he approached all these customers. We're going to go to them and say, we're going to sell you the best product money can buy, end of story. But there was a little problem. We didn't have the best product. And so we have to figure out how to do that. Now, Grouser bars are made out of steel. But it's not just steel like what even the alloy that's used for these desks. It's a hardened steel. It's a specialty metal so that when it's welded on those tracks, it has to last a long time in some really harsh environments. It's actually made up of 11 different metallurgical properties. And if those properties aren't equally rated, or in what I should say, in ratios, does that make sense, to maintain the hardness of the steel but make it so that it doesn't crack, then it'll wear out early and the customer will never buy from you again. And our product quality was not very good. So I had our person that managed our manufacturing, I had him go to the library. What do you think I had him check out at the library? A book, right? Isn't that what everybody checks out at the library? They check out a book. But not just any kind of book. What type of book do you think we had to check out? A little louder?
Probably a book on different types of alloys.
Right, yes. Believe it or not, at the library, you can check out a book on metallurgy. So he checked out a book and he went through and he says, hey, we have the wrong ratio of titanium to nitrogen. Really? Not knowing much about this product. We need to adjust this, and if we do that, I think we can get the hardness up to here. So then what we did is we called a metallurgical firm, and said, hey, here's the formula that we're thinking about tweaking on this. What do you think? He says, oh yeah, better yet. He says, if you can keep the ratio of nitrogen and titanium to this, then you could actually increase your hardness almost on an exponential scale. So what do you think we're thinking? Very good. So we went back and tried a new formula, and we went from being kind of average in the industry to the hardest, longest lasting, most durable product in the industry within about 6 months. And we actually sent product up into some of the most harshest environments in the world to be tested. How many of you have seen a show on TV called Ice Road Truckers? All right? Okay, good. Have you ever wondered what they're hauling on those big trucks up there to the mines? So there's the Diavik mine, the Anacati that they talk about up there. And by the way, they're not just mining, they're not just getting oil up there. Do you know what they're mining? Diamonds, right, yeah. Huge deposits of diamonds. Just one of those little byproducts they found when they were pulling oil out of all the little shallow lakes. Pretty amazing. Anyway, one of the things that they haul on those trucks is grouser bars, because in many of those mines, you can only get in there once a year. Because the tundra becomes soft, right? And then there's big rivers and lakes. In fact, the Great Slave Lake there is more than 50 miles across. 50 miles. Can you imagine driving a truck for 50 miles knowing that if this thing cracks, there's no way you can swim to shore? I don't care if you're Mark Allen, one of the greatest triathletes ever, you're not going to make it, because the water is about 20 degrees as well. Anyway, so they haul that up there to the mine, and they're able to take that product. We gave them free product, and they welded on the tracks, and it lasted 6 months. Well, now we got a problem, don't we? What happens if your product lasts too long? You don't get turnover on your product. So we got to increase the price. That's exactly right. So what do you think we did? We increased the price. Because we don't want to then lower the quality of our product, do we? No, we still want to give them the best stuff, but we also got to make a profit, yes?
Well, it's better for them in the long run, because they're going to, instead of, like, if you doubled the price, let's say, and it only, like a third of the time was how much it cost, they're saving money.
They're saving money. By the way, a little bit bigger than a D6, but do you know what the downtime cost is in these mines for a D11? Per hour, do you know what it costs them if the thing is sitting idle, not working? $6. A little higher, okay? Who wants to outbid $6? Sorry? $20 an hour? Okay, let's go much higher. $70,000 an hour, okay? So what we were able to do with this product is, even though we raised the price to where now what we've got is a premium product, does that make sense? Best industry. Now we have a premium price. We could still save them amazing amounts of money. In fact, even at our highest priced product was still only about a third of the cost of a brand new track pad. Does that make sense? Eventually the belt or the tracks wear out, and they're made up of generally 87 or 88 track pads with links. And eventually the bearings and the bushings underneath it wear out, so they have to put new, what we call a pin and bushing turn. But those pads are really expensive. So we were able to raise price and quality at the same time. And they paid it. So here's what happened. We took this company from obscurity to distribution in 35 countries. So we service mines east, west, north, and south. We had distribution lanes into Russia, Australia, Indonesia, Canada, of course, all over the globe. And the great thing about the product is that they literally could stop a bulldozer in its tracks and take this product and weld it on the cleats and go right back to work. Pretty amazing deal. Now, there are only 3 of these types of companies in all of North America that really distribute and manufacture this on a worldwide basis. And we were fortunate to be one of those. So we built the company up. Our first year, as we got started in the business, we had about $80,000 in EBITDA. Does everyone understand what EBITDA is? Okay, let me help you. Good. So earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It really helps us get a good feel for the operating cash flows of the business. So we had about $80,000 in the first year. And on revenues of about, I'm going to say about $500,000. So it's really a startup operation, isn't it? What do you think over the next few years we were able to increase EBITDA to, cash flow of the business? Just take a guess. Sorry? No. I wish. That would have been really nice. Okay? So we took it from about 80,000, and then the next year we were at about 350,000. And then the next year after that we were at about 650. And the company consistently generates about $1.25 million in cash flow on guess how much revenue? This will blow your mind away. So that does $1.25 million a year in cash flow on $4 million in sales. Do the math. So how profitable is that business? Right, so think about it. How much is a business then like that worth? Is it a multiple of revenue? Is it a multiple of EBITDA? Multiple of cash flows? How much would you pay? It's Steve, right?
Yeah.
What would you pay for that? All right, well, let me throw something out to you. Because we were able to get financing for the business, our equity investment was only about $750,000. So we invest $750,000, and the business by year 5, if you will, has ramped up from generating from $80,000 in cash flow to about $1 million plus a year. What's your return on that investment? Right. Have you got your principal back? Absolutely. And that's the whole idea about going in and getting these great little niche businesses. It doesn't have to be a Fortune 1000 company. I mean, America was built on the backs of small business, and this is a typical example. Anyway, what happened was we became popular enough that a company in Canada whose primary owner was the chairman and one of the owners of the Edmonton Oilers hockey franchise. And his best friend owned, one of his best buddies owned the Denver Broncos. I mean, these guys have a little bit of dough at their disposal. And he came to me, and as we talked, found out that, guess what else he owned? He owned a Grouser. He owned one of the other 3 in all of North America. In fact, as a kid, he actually had worked at his father's Grouser bar business. Go figure. Started in about 1955. So he has an affinity for that business. Could he afford to buy it? Oh yeah, are you kidding me? He just sold the Edmonton Oilers, I think it's been about a year now, maybe a little bit longer. I think they got $150 million plus US out of it. So it's really a rounding error. Nevertheless, it was a business they were very much interested in, and so they acquired that from us this last year. But if you take the amount that we originally invested, you calculate the internal rate of return based on the cash flows that we received along the way, plus the exit that we received. On top of that, we made about 5 times our investment on that deal. And it's not a big deal. What I mean by that is that equity-wise, we were able to get into it for less than $1 million. So I love businesses like that. Daryl?
What was your start and ending? How long did it take?
It took 6 years. So we bought it in 2002 and sold it in 2008. Yeah, about a year ago. Yes, and your name?
Will.
Will.
Would you say that you spend as much time, I mean, doing a startup takes a lot of time, very, very time consuming. Would you say that you spent as much time as you would have in a startup situation as you did in this situation? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, this one was unique in that, so the question is, would I spend as much time on this business as I would just going out and starting a new one? This one was unique because I didn't know much about the product. So it was like a startup in a way. I felt like I was starting at ground zero. The truth is, it's much easier to go buy a business than to start a new one. The reason is you already have so much infrastructure in place. Just basic things, for example, accounting systems, right? You also have the thing that's most important. The business has cash flow. How many startups have cash flow on day one? None, okay? So it's a great alternative to, rather than starting your own business, it's a great alternative to go and actually buy one. And there's lots of them. And we could probably do a quick internet search, but I would take a guess that just in Cache Valley alone, I'll bet that there's probably 40 to 50 businesses of this size for sale right now. So we check? Well, good. I was waiting for someone to say, oh yeah, let's take a look. All right, here. This is just one of the many sites where people list their businesses for sale. Now, what did I say? I guessed how many? 40. All right, now I promise you, I've not checked online to see how many, but let's just go take a look here. And we're going to just search by region. And let's go to Utah. And let's see here. We have 218 in Utah. And let's see what we've got. And I was wrong. There's only 6, at least on this website, that is for sale. You've got a casual dining restaurant. You've got a hair salon and day spa. Look at that. It's only $75,000. And look at the cash flow. Steve, check this out. You probably need to get certified as a cosmetologist, but look at this though. Look, here's what they're doing. How much are they asking for this business as a multiple of cash flow? It's not even 2x is what we call it, right? They're not even asking 2 times cash flow for the business. Sorry? All right.
it's also a saturated market.
Yep, but look at the cash flow from it. If you invest, so let's think in terms of payback period, okay? You have your choice of starting a new business or buying one. Let's say that you gave them full purchase price of 75 grand. How long would it take you, based on the representations of cash flow, to make back your 75? Yeah, less than 2 years, right? Now, the late Larry H. Miller was one of my mentors. And when I was in MBA school, I was fortunate enough to have him as one of my instructors. Pretty amazing experience. And so Larry has a couple of investment rules that he taught us I want to share with you. He will never invest in a deal that he cannot get at least 100% of his principal investment back within 5 years. Does that make sense? So if he invests $10,000 into the business, he had better be able to get that $10,000 back by year 5, or he will not do the deal. Which means that that company has got to produce 20% return each year. Does that make sense? In order for him to get 100% back in year 5. So if you look at this deal here, right here in Cache County, you've got 75 grand, but you've got cash flow of 54, say 55 a year, would that fall within that realm? Would you get your payback within 5 years? Yes. Good. All right, let's look at some others here. A two-wheeler dealer. Don't you love this? Cash flow up to 250K. The question is, you mean that's, how do you get cash flow up to 250K on 165,000 in revenue? So this is an example of a deal that we think it's a deal we call, it says has hair. That means it's not clean shaven, okay? This deal is not one that we would look at right away. Why?
Their projections are.
Because we already know right now that the numbers are completely inaccurate. All right, how about this? How about a hunting and recreational accessories manufacturer and distributor? This one is up to 250K as well. But is that on revenue? Oh, it's up to 500K. So they're asking 330, but we have no idea. How about a weight loss kiosk? How in the world does that work? Okay, so these probably aren't the best ones to be looking at. I'll tell you what, though, the medical testing lab, that would be an interesting one. Why? What's good about that business? People always get sick, right? It's like being a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant. Doesn't matter what economic times look like, it's a consistent business. You may not have great margins in it, but there's an opportunity. The thing that you will find, though, the characteristics of acquiring a business versus starting a new one, is that they generally already have customers, right? They have sales, and for the most part, they're going to have some cash flow. All right, let me go back here, and I'm going to... Yes, please.
So, because I looked at a lot of these websites before, and I feel like maybe everyone's on the same page and they put the definition of cash flow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
For what expenses and things like that. In your experience, can you define what most people think cash flow is when they are posting those sites?
Okay. So the question was, on the website it says cash flow, but is that net income? Is it EBITDA? What does that number represent? And I've been speaking for 2.5 hours, so you have to forgive me. Whenever you look at a deal, you have to go through the process called due diligence. And the due diligence process is an absolute must for any business. Let me draw an analogy for you. How many of you ever purchased a car before? Great. And what's your name?
Taylor?
Taylor? Yeah. All right, Taylor, what car did you buy?
A 335.
Beamer?
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, I've got some deals for you. Can we talk about that after class? That's amazing. You know, I know there's a few trust fund babies in Utah County. I just didn't know there was that many in Cache Valley, but apparently there's a few. No, I'm just teasing. So, Taylor, what kind of research did you do before you bought your 335?
Well, I knew a lot of the guys from the different dealerships. My dad bought a lot of cars there.
Okay.
And so I just pretty much told him that I figured out how much over invoice and lowest it would go.
Okay. Oh, okay. So how did you? So you did some price comparison, right?
Yeah, I just went to
Okay.
the Bellevue. I live in Seattle, so I went to
Okay.
Bellevue and 5 different dealerships. I said, okay, what's the lowest? And I pretty much figured out Beamer, the lowest will go at that time. Like corporate policy was
Yeah.
$1,500 over invoice.
Okay. Let's stop right there for just a minute. So what he did is he's trying to look at valuation, right? In other words, how much is this vehicle going to cost me? Businesses are the same way. So one of the things that we use is what we call objective criteria. That means criteria that doesn't have emotion attached to it, right? And in Taylor's particular case, he said, hey, I checked out the cars in this city, this city, this city, and also checked with BMW corporate, and based on what he's found, he can objectively say that he's going to have to pay about X for that car. And whenever we look at a business, we do the exact same thing. We always want to use comparables as one of our methodologies for evaluating the value of that business. Okay, and what about features?
As far as that one, I mean, all the cars had different things, but they were all priced out anyway, so it wasn't even like you were negotiating. It was what your standard.
Okay, so in that particular vehicle, there's a lot of standard features, but I don't know, is it manual or automatic transmission?
It's manual.
Manual transmission.
So pretty much how the dealership I went with is that, because I is an XI, and I want to do manual, and that's rare.
Okay.
The deal, it would have cost me more, but the dealership said, okay, we'll need for this amount of invoice, and we'll get you your car from California and ship it down and take care of it.
Great. So he wanted a particular model with particular characteristics, and the place he was buying it from, he said, hey, I'd like to do this, but I don't know if I'm interested unless we can do this. And the dealership said, hey, no problem. Let us go do this and we'll make a deal. When you buy a business, what do we call that? What's that? Right, negotiations, exactly. So let me draw another analogy. Whereas he's looking at, hey, I need to have this characteristics, one of the other critical factors in business is how you're going to finance it. And you might go to the seller and say, hey, look, I can get a bank loan for this much, say 70% of the purchase price of the business, and I have enough personal capital that I can cover 5% there, but I'm missing the other 25% of your purchase price. Any suggestions? And what do you think the seller should do in that particular case? What could they, Will?
A lot of times they can use the equity they have in their company against the loan to put more into it.
So sometimes when you go into a business, and this is how the whole private equity markets for the last 10 years has worked, is that they were able to derive enough equity in the business when they acquire it, that guess how much money they'd have to put into it to buy it? Zero. They could do 100% leverage buyout. How cool is that? If I could just walk into a business and say, hey, give you 10 million for that. And the guy says, yeah, no problem. So you were able to get the financing in place, cut him a check for 10 million, and you don't have any money out of pocket. And that's how all the private equity firms made all their money over the last 10 years. Those days are gone, by the way. And the reason is because are banks loaning 100% in these specialty banks? Not anymore, are they? So the rules have changed. Okay, what if I can't get some type of leverage to cover the other 25%? What do I do? Think of the term negotiation. What would you ask the seller to do? Okay, drop the price is one option. But if I'm the seller, do I want to drop the price? Okay, so what should I do? I'm the seller.
You could do an extended terms where the other 25% would come from cash flow later in the company.
Excellent. We call that seller financing. So what that means is, as Will was saying, is that we'll ask the seller to give us terms to pay that other 25%. And you're thinking, well, how am I going to come up with the 25%? Well, you simply pay him the other portion of this purchase price out of cash flows in the future of the business. Happens all the time. We call it an earn-out on the seller side. On the buyer side, they call it seller financing. So that way, if you want to go buy a business, you don't have to have all of that capital on your own. The seller can provide most of it for you. Because as I presented earlier, what is the makeup of most of the business owners in the United States, and particularly the Intermountain region now? Baby boomers, right? And are they wanting to go start new businesses right now, or do they want to retire from their businesses? Retire. And many of them are in good financial position. You give them what we call a first position or a lien on the business and have them finance it for you, and you go and operate it, make money, and pay them back over time. It happens a lot. Okay? All right, let's look at a couple more here. All right, you've got another salon for sale where they're asking 25 grand, but the revenue and cash flow is undisclosed. Yes, Taylor.
I was just going to ask about your last comment. How much will come, or like if you're buying a business from you, the seller, what's reasonable for them? What percent of business will they finance?
Typically about 10%. As high as 20, but 25 would be stretching it a little bit. It really depends on the business. Sometimes, for example, there's a firm that we advised where the owner doesn't have a family member to hand the business to, but he really likes the operations manager and wants to groom him into owning the company. So he lets him earn ownership over time into the company and finances the whole thing. In fact, I know of a deal where there was one person that financed a deal over 30 years. He just wanted to have an income stream until he passed on. And he figures, I'm not going to live until I'm 100. So he just did the math backwards and said, okay, I'll finance you over the next 30 years. And I think they're about 8 years into it, and it's worked out fairly well so far. Okay, let's look at a couple more here. There's a nightclub. Students love those. This is interesting. So the cash flow is 330, and they're asking what? 1.5. So what multiple is that of cash flow that they're asking? Good, 5x, right? 5 times cash flow for that business. Taylor, would you pay that?
No.
Why?
I find a different business like get like a multiple of 3 or 2.
Wow, good negotiator. Okay. So Taylor says he'd want to buy a business where the multiplier was about 2 to 3. There's a double-edged sword to that, though, isn't there, Taylor? What's the double-edged sword? Whenever you buy a business for 2 to 3x, you're assuming that the owner thinks it's only worth 2 to 3x.
That's true.
What if he's right? And you buy it, and you go down the road, and you're like, hey, I've done X, Y, and Z to it. I think it's worth 5x. But what was it worth when you bought it? 2 to 3x. So here's a little principle I want to teach you. Just because this is 5x doesn't mean that you need to pay 3. What if you did pay 5x and you were able to meet the rule that you get 100% of your money back, does that make sense, within year 5, but you were able to triple or quadruple revenues in this business, just lights out? Could you sell it for 5 again? Only this time it's not 5 times 330,000, maybe it's 5 times $1 million. And now Taylor, instead of driving a 335, he's driving a 755. With the James Bond package, by the way, you know they have that, with the bulletproof glass and stuff. So a good friend of mine, he's got a show, and one of my buddies in the entrepreneurship group down at the Marriott School, he owns an armoring company. The one in Texas, they were on TLC just last month. That's him. And he knows all about the bond package you can put in the Beamer. Only he says the problem is they don't reinforce the bottom, so if you get one of those like landmines, it won't help you out. But he can protect you if you want to do that. You can send your Beamer down there. Okay. Let's kind of summarize this for just a minute. What I want to teach you today is that you can get into business without having to start a new business. And acquiring a business is one of the unique opportunities that you have where you can actually get into a business that already has sales, already has cash flow, already has customers, with a lot less risk and just as much upside as a startup. And because our population in America is aging, especially when it comes to the number of business owners, your generation has an amazing opportunity starting right now to build wealth, if that's your desire, to add to the economy, to own multiple businesses, to make a difference in your community, in your state, and across the country. Because if we don't have these small businesses, what do we have in the U.S.? We don't have an economy. So someone has got to pick these up and carry the torch. The question is it going to be you? And I would encourage you as entrepreneurship majors, finance majors, economic majors, whatever you decide to study, that one of the things that you consider is taking the baton from one of these business owners and taking that business to the next level, to the next generation. Thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it.